This episode is brought to you by Principles. Are there limits to the U.S. government's debt growth? What will happen if the debts are not curtailed? What should policymakers or investors do? Those are urgent questions that legendary investor and New York Times bestselling author Ray Dalio addresses in his new book, How Countries Go Broke, The Big Cycle. The book comes out in June and is available for pre-order today, wherever books are sold.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party here in New York, as well as the County Chair of the Suffolk County Party. Welcome back, Jesse. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. And I'm Richard Weinberg, and we're delighted that you're here listening to us again on Let the Record Show. Jesse, what I want to talk about now for this show is the following. The 2024 political season is now on. It's perfectly clear that Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump are going to be the nominees of their respective parties. They each have more than enough votes to get the nomination in their conventions, or at their conventions. And it's what they call the presumptive nominee because they haven't been ratified yet by the convention delegates. But in fact, all the votes are there, and neither one of them has any competition for that. So it's a fair bet that they will be the nominees absent some catastrophic event to either one of those gentlemen. So what I want to talk about today, with that being the case, to give our take on three different issues. Lessons for Mr. Biden, lessons for Mr. Trump, and lessons for the American people. I believe, as I've said before, and you and I have talked about this, I believe this is the most important election of our lifetime. I think we're at a turning point in America. I think we're at a turning point in the world. America's role in the world is under challenge. America's status, maintaining international law and order under the Pax Americana, is under severe challenge by the axis of evil, which is Iran and China and Russia and Venezuela and Cuba and North Korea. These are real challenges. And we also have an amazing amount of, the greatest amount of division I've ever seen in my lifetime, Jesse. Half the country is one way, half the country is another. And there's a lack of respect and understanding for our institutions. So based on that, I think what you and I, since we know a little bit about the world and about America, and we're both committed to saving this country, that we should give lessons to Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump and to the American people. What do you think?
Well, today, Your Honor, I think this is fantastic. And I think that we should put in for a copay for the therapy session we're going to give the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign as we go through this, and give them, some of the suggestions as we go forward. This is a tale of two paths this year. We can continue down the path that has been brought upon us by the Biden administration and progressive socialist Democrats, or we can, set aside our feelings and, not be insulted by a mean tweet and decide to actually go back to the policies that made this country prosperous, far more secure, increased our educational opportunities, expanded our liberties and freedoms. And that's a choice you have to make. But both men and both campaigns have challenges to try and reach out to the middle. Right now, they have their wings. And maybe after the debacle that we saw, the State of the Union address last week, that took place after we had recorded our show, it's going to be interesting. I think that Joe Biden is going to have the bigger problem in coalescing his base and keeping his coalition together than that of Donald Trump. There was no bounce from the State of the Union address in the polling. In fact, I think Real Clear Politics, it has Biden down to 37%, which is actually about 1.5 points after, lower than it was before the State of the Union address. The reports that have come back after the State of the Union address have called it raucous. They called it angry. They called it everything. And I guess because the expectations were so low for Joe Biden. Can he survive an hour and a half long speech without a gaffes? Yet he did make gaffes. He made gaffes and never made any entrees, honestly, into his base. For Donald Trump, it was a solid win as Nikki Haley has suspended her campaign. The Republican committee is now coalescing behind his candidacy. And we're doing this in a broad range of coalitions. Just in some recent polling that's been taking place, non-white American voters, because of the policies like the border, inflation, crime, the failures of our blue states and their far left policies, non-white voters, according to recent polls, have it closer than this race. I think it's at 48-43 for Biden. He should be running away with that, the way his campaign needs. For Hispanic voters, Trump is it's a 48-44 for Biden. But again, that should be a traditional Democratic base for Joe Biden. That's not there. It's not there. And as being an American of Hispanic descent, I will tell you the border crisis plays into that. Just because we're Hispanic or Latinos doesn't mean that we don't like law and order. My father left tyranny and law and order to come to the United States because of it, because to embrace law and order and liberties and freedoms. So it's interesting how we see that community is forming. This is going to be a big test. And, Your Honor, we're going to be talking about this for 8 months. This is going to be the longest presidential campaign in history. 8 long months. And there's a lot of opportunities there for both men to make their case, and I hope they do for the sake of America. And I do think that the case of Donald Trump is far better than that of Joe Biden's. But there's also an opportunity for them to make mistakes. And in the case of Joe Biden, mistakes that he will make for political purposes that will put this country in danger. That's what I fear.
Well, I'll tell you what the problem is that America faces. Fundamentally, you have two of the least popular public figures in American history running against each other 4 years later. And overwhelmingly, majority of American people do not want Mr. Biden. The majority of American people do not want Mr. Trump. And yet it's a binary choice because notwithstanding the politics of Bobby Kennedy Jr., he has no chance in this election of being elected of president. And he can't even talk about a serious candidate who would run with him for vice president, talking about Jesse Ventura or Aaron Rodgers. These are not serious people who should be in a position to succeed to the presidency of the United States. So Bobby Kennedy may be an interesting gadfly and has interesting things to say, some of which I agree with and some of which I don't. He's not a serious candidate. And I submit a vote for Bobby Kennedy Jr. is a wasted vote. This is too serious a time to waste your vote. What you have to do is you have to pick the one that you can tolerate more, who's going to have better policies and a better record. And so let me talk to you about Mr. Biden. And we're not picking on Joe Biden. We're just going Biden to Trump to lessons for the American people. That's what we're talking about, Jesse. I submit to you that the Biden presidency has been a series of failures. On the foreign policy front, appeasement does not work. Appeasement only encourages adventurism. It encourages ruthless dictators who will make their mark, notwithstanding all the rhetoric we spout out about democracies and protecting world peace and the rights of citizens. It's all nonsense when Mr. Putin can invade the Ukraine, gobble up its territories, kill thousands and tens of thousands of people, have saturated bombing all over in civilian residential neighborhoods, grab up territory. Biden allowed it to happen with a portion of the Ukraine, and then Obama did it before him. They promise everything, but they've done nothing. They talk about red lines, but they don't honor them and protect. They haven't given the weaponry that was necessary. They've allowed an independent sovereign nation, a democracy, to be gobbled up in pieces by an aggressive Putin. And we still have a Congress that doesn't have enough sense, both Democrats and Republicans, to understand that there are three issues, and they have to be dealt with, whether you vote the bill separately or you vote on the bill together. 3 or 4 things have to be taken care of, Jesse. One, Ukraine has to be made secure against aggression by Russia. Otherwise, Eastern Europe is a threat. That's number one. Number two, Israel has to be protected and defended. Otherwise, the Middle East will be gobbled up by, and that's a major threat. And these are threats, by the way, to the internet, just respectively to either Israel or the Ukraine. Third, we have to make sure that China doesn't get emboldened, Jesse, by these failures of foreign policy by the Biden administration and doesn't move into Taiwan the way they moved into Hong Kong. That's very, very important. And let us not forget, as you correctly point out in your remarks, we have to protect the American border. And you can't trade off one for trading off another. All of these interests are vital American interests. They're not just interests of the Taiwanese or the Israelis or the Ukrainians. We have to get beyond that kind of parochial perspective because the attack against American interests is worldwide. What say you?
You hit on all of those issues, and I can't agree with you more. If the indication of the State of the Union address is anything to see how the campaign is going to go forward and how America is going to proceed under the leadership of Joe Biden, it's again a lurch to the left. It's antagonizing our allies. It's abandoning our friends. And I would dare to say that I believe that China is already emboldened. I think that by our inaction and the national security crisis that has been self-created by the Biden foreign policy measures, that they are already emboldened. They have seen our slow response to the initial incursion into Ukraine. They've seen how we've allowed Venezuela and Iran to grow. They've seen how we've abandoned abandoned Afghanistan and our military apparatuses there, and have allowed the very same individuals that we fought for 20 years against terrorism come back and seek more than $50 billion of our own technology and our own equipment. There's an abject failure, and that's the Biden administration. And I think the State of the Union address, and I keep going back to it because those addresses are like roadmaps for us in an election year. What we're going to see is the continuation of that. And I think, it's going to get worse. And I'm frightful for the American people and the American dream that it is going to get worse, because whoever is pulling the strings of the Biden administration, they're going to want to clutch to power. They want to hold on to it: power, influence, greed, money, and they're going to be making decisions that are not in the best interests of America, American servicemen and women, American interests. They're going to be making decisions based on the continuation of that power. What we've seen this past week, where now the Democrats have solidly taken sides against Israel, calling for new elections in the middle of a war. That's
Senator Schumer, the majority leader of the United States Senate, Jesse.
Absolutely. He's the top Jewish official in the country. And he is now throwing Israel not only under a bus, but into potential political chaos at a time when our dear ally needs to stay unified. Because not only are they fighting Hamas, they're fighting Iran, and they're fighting all of the resurrection of ISIS that's come forward since the end of the Trump administration. This was ill-advised, it's wrong, and it's all a calculated effort. You look at states like Minnesota, Michigan, and these are key states that Biden and the Democrats need to win to maintain the White House and the Senate, and possibly pick up the House. And they are kowtowing to an extremist group of elected officials in those areas.
It's heartbreaking because let me tell you this: Schumer is a leader of the Senate, and he allowed he allowed the original ill-thought-out Obama-Iran nuclear deal to go through. Now, he will say he voted against it, but I know enough about politics, and you know enough about politics, to say as follows. He voted against it so he could go back to his constituency in New York and say, I voted against it. All right. But the short answer is he should have gone to Obama and say, no way are you going to do this. I will lead the Democrats in opposing this deal. That should have been, by the way, from a constitutional law perspective, Jesse, that should have been a treaty. Wasn't it?
Exactly.
It should have been a treaty. They allowed it to get through, not as a treaty. The Senate would have voted it down. It was a vote on a treaty, by the way. And Schumer should have left that charge. And we've paid the price from the very beginning because of the foolishness of Obama and Kerry and Schumer, because Iran is emboldened now. It's on the march now. It's just days or weeks or months away from having nuclear weapons. And then we're going to have a real problem in our hands. And this is all the feat of the Democrats under the leadership of Obama, Kerry, Biden. It's awful, and Schumer has aided and abetted that, and that's a disgrace. Let the Record show will continue with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Let the Record show is on the air.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Well, Jesse, continuing our discussion about Mr. Biden, and of course we'll pick up Mr. Trump as well. Another aspect of this is what I call the catering to the Democratic Party's extreme progressive wing's obsession with Green New Deal energy policy. And I submit to you, Jesse, that this weakens our economy, makes us energy independent, and strengthens our enemies. What do you say about that?
So you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it's doing. And here's what it is. They're putting politics ahead of policy and technology. They're not actually listening to the science. For a political party that wanted us to, be locked down and have our freedoms and liberties given away or freely or handed over freely because of science, now all of a sudden science doesn't matter. But I believe that behind all this is money for their goal to advance and maintain their political influence. I think everybody understands that sea levels are rising. Of course, we've made a contribution to the change in our climate. I think that's indisputable. To the level that they describe and the dramatic efforts that they want us to take, that's what's wrong. We need to do this methodically. Let's not lead with a 30-second soundbite so that we can raise money for our political influence. Instead, let's go methodically. Let's let our minds and our science catch up to our policies and our politics and our wants. That's what's best for us. That's how we went from the horse and carriage to the Ford. That's how we did it, methodically, through testing, innovation. This is not innovation. This is speculation. This is in the name of environmental protection and environmental disaster with the mining that goes on and the inability for these materials to be recycled, and the fact that it just does not work.
No, that's the point. That's the point. You know, you have this vision. You're exactly right, Jesse. You have this vision of a so-called better environmental world, except nobody else is following this. So it's like unilateral disarmament in terms of our energy policy. We need fossil fuels. They want to eliminate on everything from cars to gas ranges to refrigerators to air conditioning to lawnmowers. I mean, it's absolutely preposterous. You need fossil fuels. And you're right. They have to prepare and deal with the realities of the science, where the science really tells you we're not ready for this. The grid will not support this. And these electric cars, for example, are not sustainable. We don't have the grid. They're not working. They're dangerous. They lead to fires that are dangerous, that they can't put out with chemical exposure and toxins that emit. Fire occurs in an electric vehicle, Jesse. You can't put the fire out. And if you do without colossal amounts of water, and when it is put out, it then spontaneously generates for a second round of fires. This is dangerous stuff. The woman who just died, Elaine Chao's sister, who was the Secretary of Labor and Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law, she died in a Tesla because she put the car in reverse and went into a lake. You have to get those windows open, I think, in 15 to 20 seconds, Jesse. Otherwise, you can't break the windows. And there's nothing that's working in the car. So this woman was frantically trying to save herself on her cell phone. She couldn't open the doors because electric vehicles don't allow you to do that. I mean, it's preposterous. They're forcing people to buy these things, and the car makers can't sell them. What do you say about that?
That's a perfect example. And like I said, listen, I say to my Democratic friends, you want us to go engage into these Paris Accords and all into this extreme climate change protection programs that don't work, but give you the soundbite and give you some political juice with a coalition that you're trying to build. But the fact of the matter is that even if we engaged in all of these accords, like the Paris Accord and such, the fact that China and India and other countries are not part of it are not going to do anything. Our role will do nothing that markedly change whatever climate is being changed by humans just living on this earth longer and at a larger population. It's just not going to do that. But you know what? Through education, through common sense approach, and demonstrating that it's methodical and right and just, that will make the American people move forward and do what's right for their greater community. You tell America, listen, everyone, the President Trump championed, created warp speed for the vaccine. He took the vaccine himself. If it wasn't for him, there would be no vaccine. The difference is he said everyone should take the vaccine, and he encouraged it. He didn't try to buy you off. He didn't try and take away your freedoms. He didn't mandate you to do that. And that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats. We encourage you. We educate. We provide it to you for you to make your choice. That's your freedom. Democrats, they'll try to buy you off with free gift cards, Met tickets. Then they'll force you to do it to keep your job, and then they'll mandate you to maintain your existence in their community for you to take it. That's the difference between these two political parties and these approaches.
Well,
and it goes to the Green New Deal.
I agree. Now, let's move on. Identity politics, wokeism. Yes. I believe those two things are very dangerous phenomena. Identity politics has nothing to do with merit. It has everything to do with results. It all has to do with redistribution and proportionality. You have to have so many blacks and so many Asians and so many whites and so many Latinos in positions. Wokeism, they teach you that these are bad words, these are bad expressions. They can no longer honestly say a man is a man or a woman is a woman. You had a justice, a Supreme Court appointed by Obama, who couldn't even testify before the United States Senate or confirmation hearing that what is a man and what is a woman. I mean, it's ridiculous. So identity politics. And what's the worst manifestation of that? You give up quality and performance and ability just to have tokenism. And let me say this. This is dangerous times where we need the best and we need the brightest. What we don't need is these gimmicks like reparations, Jesse. The state legislature and the governor of California tried that gambit, and they had to walk away from it because it only divides people and it's unaffordable. And guess what? The state legislature and the governor of New York saw it was such a great idea in California that they ponied it along, and they've now have a commission going forward in New York State, Jesse, to talk about reparations and giving away free money to people who allegedly hundreds of years ago, relatives may or may not be victims of slavery. Well, guess what? There's now a fight in the black community over that issue. Is it only the people who can show the demonstrable connection that the family were slaves? Or do West Indians get a piece of that? Or if your family was not in slavery, are you entitled to it just by dint of the color of your skin? What do you think about that?
I just think these are policies that don't unite us. They don't heal past grievances from 150 years ago. We are well past the times before the Civil War. Our country almost got split over. We maintained our unity. We grew together. The Civil Rights Acts came forward. All people of all different race, creeds, or religions are now together, and now they're prospering when they have an environment of freedom, liberty, and entrepreneurialism. If sometimes there are times when you need to give a hand up, but you don't need to always give a hand out, and that's the difference here in the two political parties and I say that in the two approaches of these two presidential candidates. So I do believe that these democratic policies, like you just said, reparations, this is not to help people. This is not to help the ancestors of people. This is to maintain the divide and also to claw back support. They're basically trying to buy people's off. They're trying to buy people's off.
Absolutely.
Yep, exactly. And let's, God bless them, Joe Biden and the Democrats were successful in 2022 when they put forward elimination of all college and university loans. They knew they couldn't do it without an act of the legislature. It did not matter. I mean, the act of the Congress. It did not matter. They went forward with it, and that played with energizing the youth base here in the country. And they were successful and the red wave that was expected became a trickle.
Absolutely right. Now let's move on. Another concern is that this Biden administration and its Justice Department have allowed the weaponization of the criminal justice system. It's a weapon, a political weapon using law enforcement and the courts and the prosecutorial function to go after a political opponent. And I submit to you, Jesse, that this undermines respect for law, the rule of law, faith in our institutions. And I am telling you, because I've studied this and you and I have talked about this, every one of these cases that are brought against Donald Trump are all flimsy political prosecutions and are not worthy of being in our court system. They're all a result of an attempt to destroy Trump so he will not be a viable presidential candidate. There's not a case that's brought against Trump that's worthy of being in the court system. What say you?
I think we're actually seeing that. We've demonstrated this, that the Democrats have methodically instituted a two-tier system of justice. They're doing it to Donald Trump, and he's just a point to the spear, but they're doing it other ways. Hiring 87,000 new IRS agents. You think those IRS agents are going to go after George Soros's funds or any of these big financial networks? No. They're going to go after families like yours and mine. They're going after the mom and pop businesses. They're going after every business on Main Street because they'd rather go with the big box stores and basically clear-cut communities and place the same housing in the same place that they control the people on where they can live, how they can live, and how much they can afford. That's what the problem is here. That's what they're doing. They're trying to reshape society, and the way you do it, first and foremost, is by establishing a two-tiered system of government, a system of justice here. And that's wrong. Even our dear friend, Eric Levine, not the biggest Trump fan in the world, as we know, but he is also agrees about the way that this has been wronged by the Democratic administration. And let's not blame just Joe Biden. The same can be said for Kathy Hochul and the Democratic legislature, and especially those leaders and minions like Senator Gianaris. They have done that here in the state of New York. Unfortunately, it appears that the federal government, Joe Biden and Obama, began this process with his FBI when it came down to the dossier, the Russia hoax about the 2016 elections. What did they do? They lost the election, and they immediately started campaigning for 2020 by trying to illegitimize Donald Trump. It's not the first time they've done it, Your Honor. You know this. You and I are people who know history. They tried to do this to George W. Bush in 2000 during that presidential election when it had to go to the Supreme Court. So I say to my fellow New Yorkers, my fellow Suffolk County residents, this two-tiered form of justice that's coming down by the Democrats and Joe Biden and Albany is not about Donald Trump. It's not. Eventually, he's just the example they use because he's an easy target. But this is a two-tiered form of justice and government, now if I think of it, that's going to be imposed upon us if we don't stand up, wake up, and create a movement to stop the progressive agenda.
Well, I'll tell you what's troubling, and this is a discussion that you and Eric Levine and I had last week. When you talk about the 87,000 IRS agents, they have to justify their existence, Jesse. They
Exactly.
have to do something. Now, what do we know from when, I think her name was Lois Lerner, was head of that unit in the IRS? They shut down conservative and Republican voices. They went after them using all the power of the IRS. And we talked about this whole attempt to try to tax unrealized capital gains. And Eric, to his credit, pointed out to us as follows. I keep saying you buy a stock for 10, it goes up to 17. I haven't sold it, but I still have to pay tax every year.
Exactly.
That sort of increase. But Eric was a step ahead of me, and he pointed out if you buy a painting for 10 grand or 20 grand, and then the IRS agent comes in and says, Mr. Garcia, that painting's worth 100 grand, and we're going to tax you on that. You know, that's some arbitrary, capricious decision by an IRS agent who made him an art expert. And guess what? They now file criminal charges against you for underreporting income and not paying your taxes. So they can criminalize dispute over valuation. So what do you say about that?
It's absolutely wrong. And that's a perfect example of this. Here's the thing. You said it right before, and you always go to that line before I can get there. And God bless you because you're fantastic with it. 87,000 IRS agents have to justify their existence. You know what would be easier to justify their existence? 87,000 border agents.
Amen.
That's what would.
Amen.
That's what would they will far easily be able to justify their existence.
Well, we have to take a break, Jesse. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in but a few moments. Thank you.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves.
Just a little further. You got this.
That we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
This is a special alert to all Americans who own a vehicle with less than 200,000 miles with an auto warranty about to expire or with no warranty coverage at all. Due to a decline in the economy, CarShield is announcing a low-cost month-to-month vehicle protection plan that is now available to the public to save any driver out-of-pocket expenses on future auto repairs. Call now to find out how you can pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. Yes, you heard that correctly. Pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. An open phone line has been established for all drivers to call for a free quick quote. Call 800-266-9102 now. Drivers who are covered will not have to pay for covered repairs again. This protection plan is at an all-time low. Additionally, drivers who activate this vehicle protection today will also receive free roadside assistance, free towing, and car rental options at no additional cost. Call us for your free quick quote today. 800-266-9102. That's 800-266-9102. What do you have to lose? Call 800-266-9102. Again, 800-266-9102.
This is Let the Record Show. Using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Well, we've been talking about some lessons from Mr. Biden, and hopefully he gets the message on this therapy session, which will be good for Mr. Biden, but more importantly, be good for America, Jesse. Now, I want to talk to you about lessons from Mr. Trump. The first thing I want to say about Mr. Trump is, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it, as my mother, God bless her, used to say, some people have an unfortunate personality. Now, I'm not nearly as offended by Donald Trump as other people, but I understand why they may take offense by his style or his language. He needs to get some impulse control. He has to watch his language and his attacks on fellow Republicans as well as Democrats and just the public at large. He hasn't learned a lesson, Jesse. You have to make friends every day, not enemies. So I want to get your thoughts about what, if Mr. Trump were listening to us, what we need to tell him to do so that he'll be a better candidate, but more importantly, a better leader if he gets a second term, Jesse.
First of all, I think is that he needs to know his audience. And now that he's tacking, and he has said that he's been looking at a general election race, it's far easier for him to build his coalition. We see that coalition on the Democrat side. It's fractured. It's loose. They're never satisfied enough with Biden. He continues to need to couch out to them. Where in the Trump situation, we have a movement going on. You know, the Democrats have made the same thing. They've called them deplorables. They've called MAGA trying to be fascists. They're far from that. We're all Republicans and care about this country and love this country. We see more Hispanics, more African Americans, the different mosaic of our country is flocking towards Trump and the Republican policies because of that very thing. Policies. The more Donald Trump can make this a policy-driven campaign, that he's done it before, and he can do it again on the economy, on national security, on energy independence, on crime, law, and order, on the judiciary, and the list goes on, as government being a partner with the private sector, life, liberty, and freedom of the American people and choice, helping entrepreneurism. the more he talks about his policies that were so successful from his first term, that was derailed by COVID, that is where that coalition is going to grow. We don't need to worry about, at that point, he won't need to worry about 6, 7 battleground states. You know, we're talking about an electoral avalanche or landslide if he does that. You know, there will be times to rally the base that he's going to have to pick, you know, to do what he does, and I guess maybe name call, because that's inherent about it. Maybe he thinks that's what his base needs to hear from time to time. But if you recall the debates from 2020, he was far better in the second debate when he spoke about his policies and he spoke about a prosperous America and the differences between him and Joe Biden's records than he did in the first one. But again, he has that Reagan-esque ability that he needs to tap into. He can be funny. He's not self-effacing, but he can be funny. And he can also use humor and off-the-cuff remarks to humanize and actually make easy to explain very complex policies that we need to deal with on an everyday basis.
Well, Jesse, let me say this. Reagan, I think, said it best in the debate and in his messaging against President Jimmy Carter when Carter was seeking a second term. He asked the American people, he said, yes, are you better today than you were 4 years ago? And the answer overwhelmingly was people were in far worse shape. The American people were far worse shape then, after 4 years of Carter, than it had been previously. And I submit to you, this country and the American people are in far worse shape today than we were under Trump. The border was secure. The economy was humming. We were keeping our enemies in check. There was some sense of national purpose and national immunity, cohesion. I thought that was very important. He made sure there was a balanced judiciary, that a judiciary that enforced the law and interpreted the law, didn't see themselves as a super legislature to enforce their own views of public policy. I thought that was very, very important. He did all of these things. All he has to do is run on his record. He has to reach out to unite the Republican Party. He needs to reach independents and Democrats. He should always avoid giving his enemies ammunition to be used against him. He's got to learn that lesson. That all goes back to my first point. He needs impulse control. He needs to stay on message. Do the Reagan message. Are you better off today in each of these things? And you've articulated what they are. Are we better off today or are we worse off today? And I submit to you, on every calculable measure, Jesse, we are far worse off under the Biden administration than we were under Trump. We were doing just swell with Trump up until COVID. And COVID was brought to you not by Donald Trump, but the Chinese Communist Party with their lab. And that caused disaster. It cost, 7, 8, 10 million people's lives across the world, Jesse, and over 1 million people here in the States. And what say you?
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's what we've been saying. That you said it perfectly, and I wanted to try and say the same thing in a different way. But this is a clear campaign. It's about making America great again. There's nothing wrong, and Democrats can try and attack that slogan and make it evil. What's evil about making America great again? It worked for Reagan. It worked for Trump in 2016, and it almost worked for him again in 2020. But it's very simple. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? In every measure that Americans decide that question or answer that question, they're not. Paychecks are smaller. Freedoms have been limited. Crime is rampant. The border is open. Special interests have taken over our schools, indoctrination instead of education. And we have a judiciary that does not work for the people, but work for politicians. And our U.S. servicemen and women are not being backed. And our allies abroad who are fighting battles that we don't want fought on our shores, we're turning our back on them too.
Well,
that all has.
That's exactly
that
right.
That all has an impact on the lives of a Jesse Garcia who lives in Suffolk County, a Richard Weinberg who lives in New York, a John Smith who lives in Iowa, and even the Jane Smith who lives in California.
Well, I think that's right. I think fundamentally, this is the advice I'd give President Trump. Tell the people what you will do to protect and defend America and make all our lives better. Stop talking about how the election of 2020 was stolen.
Yeah, exactly. He needs to stop with that.
Just stop that.
Everyone who believes it believes it. Everyone who doesn't believe it does not believe it. There's a new election coming forward. Let's make sure this one doesn't get stolen.
Exactly. And because nothing wrong with maintaining election integrity. In fact, you can't have a real democracy unless you have election integrity. But stop talking about the election of 2020 was stolen. Do what you have to protect the integrity of this election. Stop letting people characterize your campaign for re-election to the presidency as a campaign of revenge. You're not here to do revenge against your political enemies. You're here to protect and defend this country and make American citizens' lives better. Okay?
If anybody wants to use the word revenge with Donald Trump in this campaign, he should come up and say, this is a campaign of revenge against failed democratic policies like cashless bail, a two-tier justice system, inflation. That's what higher taxes. That's what it should be against, not about personalities.
Absolutely right. So I think we should move on. Just a couple of things I want to say before we give advice to the American people. I want to say this. Stop attacking NATO because we need NATO. I understand it's a negotiating gimmick. You want to get more money to fund the military programs, 2% of their budget that they have to fund the military and NATO. Stop it. The real threat to me is not a NATO. We have members who underfund. To me, the real issue is the United Nations, which is the tool of our enemies. You want to attack somebody? Go after the United Nations, which is a fraud. It's anti-American. It's racist. It's anti-Semitic. That's the real. And there are apologists for the axis of evil. Enough of that. So, advice to the American people, Jesse. What advice would you give to the American people?
My advice to the American people is don't fall for big tech, social media, what the talking heads tell you on mainstream media. You know what? Talk to your neighbors. Talk to your local cop. Look at your bank account. See how your coworkers are doing. When you look in the eyes of your children, do you see hope and that their lives is going to be better than the one you had? Or is it going to be the same or a little bit worse? That's what I would do. And let's put the personalities away when it comes to our candidates. These are, like you said, polling shows that these are two of the most unpopular candidates running for a major office. It is what it is. The system is the system. We have to move forward. So that now the choice is, do we want to go down the same path of 4 years ago when we have open borders, rampant crime, rampant inflation, our allies are questioning our viability, and our international enemies are at our doorstep? Or do you want someone that maybe is not as polished, is not a politician, but is someone who has built a business, who says what he means and means what he says, and is really honestly in the corner of the American people? And you know what? There's nothing wrong in any form of debate or dialogue to say, I'm an elected official, and I'm going to put America first. I'm going to put Americans first.
I agree with that, Jesse. So my advice...
You've got a broad...
Yeah.
Yes. And one more thing, Your Honor.
Sure.
It's easier for Trump, again, to build that coalition he needs than it is for Biden. Well, Biden needs to keep chasing the tail of his coalition. Trump does not.
Yeah, but the problem I have, overwhelming problem I have with Mr. Biden has to be that he's selling out the interests of America for his electoral success. And that's a big, big problem. But I would say my advice to the American people is who's protecting America as opposed to who's trying to get himself elected back to the presidency, and who's going to pay the price for selling out America to win the presidency. That's the first thing. But let me submit to you certain other concepts I think that are very important. America is a very unique country. It really is, as Reagan said, the shining light on the hill. It's a beacon of freedom. Understand why this is the best country in history for freedom, opportunity, and quality of life. They need to think about why we've been so successful since 1776. Why are we successful? Next, understand why America must engage in the world, and that isolationism will only make us less secure, Jesse, in a very dangerous world. Appreciate the blessings of the constitutional system that prevents the tyranny of the majority and it allows for freedom for minorities and for liberty for minorities. Understand, most important of all, that if we are divided internally, the enemies of America will take this as an opportunity to undermine us, Jesse, and that our future as a world leader and for peace and security throughout the whole world is dependent on us surviving. And if we don't do what we have to do, our opportunities and our freedoms are not guaranteed, because every great country, every great empire throughout history ultimately got unraveled and fell. What say you, Jesse?
You're absolutely right. And what we talk about the shining city on the hill, you know what? There is American exceptionalism. We should embrace it. We should hold it very high. We should not be shy about it. There is this American exceptionalism that runs through the veins of each and every American. And we should embrace that, show it off, and use that as the energy that we need. And I will tell you that I do believe that in the two candidates that believes in American exceptionalism, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump was never part of an administration that went on an apology tour on a global stage for America. He's not someone who has been part of an administration that has embarrassed America or embarrassed her servicemen and women. Well, that's why Republicans now are coming. And I tell America, I know we have high crime. I know we have open borders. And I know we have high inflation. And I know that, we have political leaders and political elected officials in different corners of this state, like Suffolk and Nassau and others, doing our best to hold on. But America, help is on its way. It's 8 months away, but help is on its way.
Well, Jesse, I want to go back to the point you made at the beginning of the show, because I think it's so instructive, and it relates to everything we've been talking about today. Our issues about lessons from Mr. Biden, our lessons from Mr. Trump, the lessons for our fellow Americans, the American people.
You're talking about the copay we're owed now? No, I'm kidding.
Right, that one. But that speech, I could barely sit through and watch Mr. Biden's State of the Union. It was a shameless political campaign speech. It wasn't about America. It was about buying off constituencies. It was about setting forth false narratives, and they want us to believe it. You kept repeating the same thing over and over and over again, Jesse. But the economy is not good. The debt is escalating. Our economy is predicated on the ingenuity, the productivity of the private sector, not by government handouts. The economy is not good. We're weakened militarily. He just put in a budget, Mr. Biden, that totally gives 2% increase. Well, if you know anything about inflation, that doesn't even keep up with the rate of inflation, for God's sakes. And in a world we're threatened by outside enemies, you need to build up the military. You need to have a strong military, and a strong military then sends a message to the other side that you're willing to use that strong military to protect American interests and American freedoms. The speech from beginning to end was a sham. There is no national unity, and it's because Biden and the other sycophants have absolutely refused to unite the people. He gives a great speech, inaugural address, Mr. Biden, about he's going to be a unity president, and for the last 3+ years, He's done nothing but divide us. You have the final word, Jesse.
My final word is that the Constitution says that the president shall from time to time report to Congress on the state of the union. That means what our country is about, where we are in our country and where we're going. It does not mean that we begin with Ukraine. That's not what it means. He should have began that speech about what's important to Americans, how we're going to be safer with the borders he's left open, how we're going to be able to afford our lifestyle, just get everyday life with the inflation he's provided us, how we're going to feel safe in the unsafe atmosphere that he has and his party have created, where they embrace criminals and tie the hands of cops and judges and prosecutors. That's how the State of the Union should have gone. It should have commenced. From that point forward, it was off the rails. And the best thing about it's not just me saying this as a political leader, and it's not just you as a common sense Democrat. Look at the polls. There is no bounce for Joe Biden in those polls, even after those polls, even after his speech, which was a give back to every little fracture part of his coalition. It was still not enough because he couldn't deliver.
And I think people know that Joe Biden is the spokesperson. Well, that's a whole other discussion, which we'll talk about next week. But the fact of the matter is he's become a spokesperson for a false narrative and national disunity. This has been Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is the very distinguished, eminent political leader of the Republican Party, Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the state Republican Party, and the county chair of Suffolk. Jesse, I want to thank you once again for being with us on this great show, Let the Record Show. We hope our listeners have enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be back next week. God bless you, and God bless America.
Let the Record Show is on the air.